Greetings, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Dreamscapes. Today we have our friend Tara McFarland from Denver, Colorado, and she is an intuitive life coach and in a former life spent 24 years as a civil engineer like my dad. And you can find her at createconversationllc.com. And we spoke... and we're going to come right back to you in 2 seconds. I forgot my own dang housekeeping. Hey, would you kindly like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Always need more volunteer dreamers. And there are currently 14. This is the physical copy of book 14. 14 books of historical dream literature available on BenjaminTheDreamWizard.com through Amazon. This is Dreams in Homer and Greek Tragedy. A tremendous amount of work on this one. The original guy didn't do a lot of translating, so I did it all. Wow. So it's in there. You got Greek translations into English and whatnot. You can get a t-shirt. Hey, coffee mug, all that good stuff. I'm keeping our guests waiting. So that's the housekeeping. Tara, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. We started to talk a little bit about what you do. And I was like, wait a minute, we got to get this on the air. So what is it you do? And how does that work? Yeah.
So, like Benjamin said, I have 24 years of experience as a civil engineer. The short version, we can get into details if you want, but the short version is I burned out of my career actually about year 20, hung on for another 3-ish, 4-ish years, and trying to figure out what I was going to do next. So the next ended up becoming a life coach, which I didn't really see as something that I was going to end up doing. I just started to learn about intuition and following energy and noticed how things were showing up that just pointed me to life coaching is a place for me to land. And my focus is on people essentially like me, right? So those of us who are super analytical, stuck in our heads, other engineers who need a little bit of coaching, a little bit of encouragement to dive into those scary words like vulnerability, transparency, showing emotions, being okay with emotions. And that's the kind of work that I do now.
That is very cool. It's a couple of thoughts occurred to me while you were saying that is interesting parallels in your path and mine. I also spent 20 years in emergency inpatient psychiatry and career change after 20 years. I'm like, I want to do something else. I want to keep doing what I'm doing sort of, but in a new way. And 20 years ago, I couldn't have said, someday I'm going to be a dream wizard, not even on the horizon. It just kind of happened one day that I'm like, I don't really want to do that anymore. Let's see what else I can do. That similarity too. And I wanted to mention this too, like I said, off the air before, whereas I may be more of a wizard of words, we have here a mathematician, someone of a very different skill set from mine, like my dad, an engineer, things I cannot math, not for basic addition, subtraction, maybe I can balance a checkbook unless I fail to carry the one. That's where my problems come from.
Right.
But it's, so I was going somewhere with all this. It's not just me talking over you, but the idea of, so I think I'm an INTJ, the architect, if I have that right. It's kind of my personality type. I don't know if you know what yours is, but,
with Myers-Briggs, I tested several times as an ISTJ, but I'm definitely not that.
Fair enough. Yeah.
That felt like a lot of almost conditioning that I had taken on. I was supposed to be this way. If I I actually have a paper copy from one of my tests and I've retaken it and I haven't looked lately, but I think I came out like an INFJ. I definitely still have that judgment stuff going on. That is how I make decisions. But
a little more into the feeling than the thinking, which is
feeling and the intuition for sure.
A perfect bridge to what you're doing there. I also mentioned before, that's why I stopped our conversation off the air, is we have a lot of folks like myself and like you to some degree who are very object oriented and mathematically focused, and we're living a lot of our life in our heads in terms of problem oriented, solution focused type of stuff. And then we got to suddenly interact with other humans and put this into practice, because we can't do it alone. We got to do it in a team with other people. And that means effective communication towards collectively accomplishing the goal. So from what I understand, this is what you're doing now, is facilitating that conversation.
I am. The thing is, when I burned out of my career, it was because I switched from being a very technical design engineer and like a technical team lead just leading how we were going to be designing, to a program management role, which then involved a whole, multidisciplinaries, teams throughout, where I was working was in the Western United States. So I really had remote teams across several different states, several different offices. Everybody had different focuses and priorities. And one of the things that I didn't understand was, just because we are all on the same project doesn't mean that the entire project team was aligned to that project necessarily, because everybody had multiple projects that they were dealing with and that they were part of. And depending on which office you were in, your focus was different and your priorities are different. But I had no training on how to communicate effectively. It literally felt like we were just supposed to figure it out somehow. And I was not figuring it out. And I started to receive quite a bit of negative feedback in which I didn't feel supported by my supervisors, because it felt like to me at the time, they were taking the position of whoever was giving me the negative feedback, saying, my demeanor in a meeting was, didn't look good, or I looked angry, or I shouldn't be talking to people the way that I was talking to people, which I have an extremely direct style of communication, and it didn't come across well. Exactly. So really the point where I started to really just hit the wall in my career was this part of, I didn't actually know how to talk to people. And I hadn't been taught, because in the engineering field, the focus when you're a young engineer all the way up through the mid-level is mostly on what's your technical skill. And that is where all your training is. Mm-hmm. That's where all my training was. And then, you might get into these positions where all of a sudden a little bit of political savvy needs to come in. You need to know how to maybe flow with what's going on, get curious about what's going on with other people, instead of just coming in and going, we're going to finish this project, right? Everyone's on the same team, which is kind of where I was coming from.
For sure.
And that didn't work.
Yeah. Well, and then there's sometimes a tremendous feeling of injustice, and the idea of someone comes and says, you're doing something wrong. And you go, well, what was wrong about it? And they're like, it's just wrong. You figure it out. You did it wrong. It's like, it's easier to say something's wrong than to say, here's the way you should do it. That might be better, easier, might facilitate it. And so it's like, I'm just being judged with, well, what's the standard? Who sets the standard? Why is that guy right and my approach is wrong? What the hell is going on here? So probably that would drive a very logical, rational person insane. Like this this aggression shall not stand, as they say. We're gonna figure it out. So you turned your engineer brain back on and said, there's got to be processes, there's got to be ways to facilitate this. And it seems like from your personal experience, it drove you to understand the dynamics, and then to go, you know what, I could teach these to other people. Was that kind of your path? Am I projecting onto you, or?
No, actually, you're sensing right into it. That's exactly what happened. But, first I had to go through my own unraveling, as it were. Yeah. At the point where I knew that I couldn't go on any longer, and that it was this point of hitting for me where I hit a wall, and I just felt like I've checked all the boxes off like I was supposed to.
Yeah.
I got the degree, and I have the job, and I got promoted, and I was on my way up the corporate ladder, and I was supposedly doing all the right things. But then I was also noticing, like, I just felt empty and I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And so for me, it ended up being like an entire unraveling and a spiritual awakening that took a couple of years for me to get through that piece, to be able to get into the space of, oh, now that I've been through all of this, I can help guide other people going through the same thing. And not only that, but noticing where there are people in the engineering industry who are really hungry to like have this conversation and to have something change in their teams, which honestly is usually the younger generations, not even necessarily my generation or above. Some people, but there is a big push kind of from the younger generations of this isn't how we want to work anymore. We're not out for the rat race. You know, I'm not going to sit here and work a ton to make somebody else money. There has to be something fulfilling. And then I can bring in this conversation of like, okay, so then how do we make our teams work efficiently and effectively together?
Yeah.
And make everyone's life better at work. I mean, that's really what it's about, right? Because
for sure,
I think that one of the big things that happens with engineers, and especially my particular brand of engineering, because I was in dam safety, which is you have this mission, which is keep dams safe for people living downstream from the dams. And so you do have like this broader vision and mission outside of yourself in terms of serving public. The thing is you can lose that when you're in these environments that feel cutthroat or feel like you're being judged all the time or feel like, you know, if only certain people get the advancement or things like that. And so you have to bring in a little more compassion to our work for ourselves versus, you know, always trying to give and produce something that's going to help. So we already have like this overarching mission that people buy into, but if you're still like not happy to go to work, then your performance is not going to be that great.
Yeah.
It just isn't.
No, for sure. So in practical terms, do you come into, say, a specific company as a consultant and work with one team? Do you give seminars? Kind of how do you apply that in a practical sense?
I have a few different ways I'm doing it. Again, I follow intuition and I really follow where energy is taking me. So I have a workshop that I've brought into companies and into organizations that I like to put together. So for these types of things, I love using the team dynamics cycle. And then also the DISC personality behavioral types, because I feel like DISC is very intuitive. So even if you don't take the assessment, I can give a workshop and describe the 4 quadrants, and then everyone can break themselves out into the quadrants and then see, oh, this is maybe why I'm having trouble. For those of us who are the D dominants, listening to other people, right? Because we start to notice.
Well, I was going to stop you for just 2 seconds and have you tell the audience what the DISC is.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the DISC profile, there are 4 main behavioral types in it. So there's D for dominant, which is somebody who tends to be very direct, very action oriented. There's I for influencer. These would be like your full on cheerleaders. And a lot of times they love to like come up with ideas and then maybe follow through is a little bit difficult, because sitting those people down in a cubicle is not their idea of a fun time. They're very social people in general. And then you have the S's, which is steadiness or supportive. And these people tend to be like they're very much team players. And so they really love to be part of a team. They love to do their part and they love to like help the team move forward. But sometimes you're not necessarily going to see like somebody like that stepping up to lead, because they like to kind of hang out in the background. And then the C's are conscientious. And these would be, if you think of stereotypical engineer, data driven, analytical, loves their spreadsheets like nobody else, that would be the person. They're very data driven and they're very concerned about getting things right and being accurate, which then is awesome until you don't realize that is a little bit, will bump up against some of the other personalities, especially like a D or an I type, who's just like, oh, that's a great idea, let's go implement, versus we have to have every single I dotted and T crossed.
For sure.
And those are just a very general, broad overview. Obviously, we are all part of like we're all four of them all the time. We just really have a preference towards one or the other.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have a strong preference, and sometimes you have an ability really to flex between all four quadrants pretty easily.
Yeah. Seems there's two, whatever. I was having thoughts of it while you were saying that too. Just describe the utility of it. And you would probably say that in each of those quadrants, there's positives and negatives. There's things that make this a strength and things that can be a bit of a drawback in terms of interacting with other styles. And there was another point I was going to make that was building on that shit. And the idea that we can consciously choose to shift our style if we know where we're coming from and saying this particular situation maybe needs this approach. You can kind of wiggle over and expand your like an amoeba, kind of putting out a pseudopod into another area for a while, and then you can pull back to where you were before and just kind of adapting, as you say, go with the flow kind of style. I don't know if that accurately describes what you're talking about. These are just my thoughts.
Yeah, often what happens with the with a disc profile, if I use myself as an example, so I'm a D type, and I'm also very strong. I have a very strong preference for the D type. I keep taking it thinking I'm moving into the circle, and I'm really not. I'm still kind of on the outside edge of it, which gives me, I'm very strong in D, and I also tend towards the C, the analytical side. So what I see is like I'm very comfortable in that position, in that role. And then what happens to push me out of my comfort zone is to recognize, just because I say jump, not everyone's going to say how high. Mm-hmm. People need to be heard. And then I can learn how to flex in between, these other quadrants where I don't have such a strong preference. And it takes more energy to flex into those, but knowing your own style really helps to break down, okay, not everybody is like me. And that actually was probably the best feedback I ever got when I did a 360-degree review at work. Was somebody wrote down, she just needs to understand not everybody is like her. And I didn't really understand it at the time. And then over the last few years, I've understood, because what was happening was I was just full on not noticing what other people need in terms of being listened to and heard. And that's for me to learn how to slow down. My style is to go fast. Like barrel down a straight road and go and get it done and get to the end point, right? So for me, that practice has become, okay, slow down. That can feel uncomfortable to me. Yeah. And listen to other people around me. And so that's like, I like to think of it more as what takes more energy versus where you're comfortable. Because then nothing's bad or wrong in it. It's just learning how to work with what your style is.
For sure. And as you say, you've done things where you have people sort themselves into these categories, and probably I'd probably lean heavily into the conscientious side of things. I'm like, being a book editor and whatnot, literally every I dotted and T crossed, and typos are horribly embarrassing. And I will take 3 months working on one book and I will read it to myself 7 times because I keep finding things until I make a complete read through and there are no typos. It's not ready to be published. So probably other persons of that type, we are going to get along great and communicate with you because they get where I'm coming from. They know exactly what my goal is and why it takes me forever to do these things and why I'm so meticulous about it. And probably it's very easy in these categories as well to say, especially in my, that C category of like, I get that not everybody is like me, but they should be, because my way is the best way. And you probably have the same thing too with yours. Like, why can't we just go and get this done? I'm like, slow your roll, sister. Let me check. Let me check again. I need this.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh no. And just being aware of that is that, like, I think the awareness of these kind of things, the understanding of ourselves and others is what decreases a lot of conflict. We're not butting heads to control each other. We have these different styles where it's like, this is what I think is right and good. I'm trying to do it the right way as best as I can conceive it. And it just works differently for different people. That's a fantastic point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think also when we're working in teams, then we can start to notice if we know where our team is in the cycle of team formation and the dynamics and how it changes as things change in your project, then you can understand how your type is going to inform how you react in every cycle. Some people who tend to be more team players, when the team dynamic cycle has 4 stages to it. At least that's the one that I teach, which is forming, storming, norming, and performing. Most of the time, we don't want to hang out in storming because it's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah. The generation of ideas has to be very chaotic because you're that's by nature. Yeah.
And, I think as engineers too, like we really don't want to hang out there because we just want to get to the solution and know exactly what we're doing, rather than stay in what feels messy. You can have all different types of conflict in that particular stage where you could have interpersonal conflicts, you can have conflicts between, offices or divisions or ideas or just, conflicts of all of a sudden the problem is more complicated than you realized. And now what? Right. So there's all this kind of, it can feel really uncomfortable to be in that space. And depending on your personality type, you either just want to like really get out of that space as fast as possible, or maybe you just kind of sit back and wait and observe and don't really contribute when maybe you have a whole bunch of ideas that need to be brought out. But if you're feeling like somebody else is taking the lead or being dominant or whatever, you may not bring forth your ideas that would actually help the team go forward. And so that's why I think it's important to understand your type. And then when you're in these stages to go, okay, this is my type and these are the ideas I have, especially for people who tend to be quieter. When is it time for you to bring forth your ideas? Right?
For sure.
Which is pretty much every time, but and then noticing if you're a personality that tends to be, sort of that bigger personality, the more dominant, even like the influencing personality, they're all like cheerleader, rah, rah, let's go team. But they also want to get stuff done faster than than the other two. So you have to understand that if you're in that stage and it's uncomfortable and you don't like being there and you're the person who just wants to get to point B real quick, that's a signal for you to slow down, to allow other people's ideas to come through. And that will help you get through that stage because you can't skip it. If you try skipping it, I've been on so many teams where it's obvious that we've tried to skip that stage. You end up with you never quite actually get out of it is my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of get to a state where you feel like, yes, we're in norming and we're starting to get things done and we're checking all the boxes, but then you have all this backdoor, back channel chat. People are going around each other. Nobody knows who's doing what. Nobody really understands who the point of contact is or who they need to talk to, or they don't want to talk to that person. So then they go to somebody else. And you haven't really established how you're going to communicate, which is what the storming phase is for. And so if you haven't done that, then you just end up in like these, at the end of a project, just feeling like, well, we got it done, but I'm not happy about it.
Definitely. Yeah. And that storming phase is definitely something that, of course, from borrowing from the brainstorming, that's the idea of there are no bad ideas, which to the C types are like that. The illogical. Yes, there are bad ideas, but like, wait a minute. It doesn't mean we won't identify bad ideas, but we're not going to censor yet. Anyway. But some people, and I think this is where understanding process of what are we trying to accomplish at each phase is very important, because you've got this idea of we're not just throwing up ideas on strategies for what the ideal outcome might look like. I mean, some people think of brainstorming as we just pick a goal. Yes, that's part of it too. Also, now what is the process for achieving the goal? Who's responsible for what? You brought that up, that idea of really knowing who do you report to, who's delegated what tasks. That's all in that brainstorm area, which, yeah, for people that just want to go and get it done, but it can't be skipped. Otherwise, the unresolved past trauma, so to speak, carries forward and fucks you over in the future. You really can't skip some of these steps of nailing down what to do and how. So yeah.
I would also suggest too that like if we're really paying attention to those phases and where we are, that's where this idea of transparency comes in. Like you have to bring to the table really what's happening. one of the projects that I was on, we had a third party partner, and it was the first time we had tried to partner with somebody outside of our organization in my particular office. And I knew I could tell they weren't telling us the whole story, but I was in an organization that likes to play nice and likes to be very polite. And so it was, don't worry, we'll just keep going. We're just going to keep trying to move forward. But there was always kind of this undercurrent of, I don't think we have the whole story. And if we had the whole story, we could have approached the problem in a completely different way. And instead, 3 years later, the whole project came to a standstill.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That not failing to really get cards on the table in terms of like what is happening. I mean, this speaks to family dynamics of stuff too, of like taboos and keeping secrets and not resolving conflicts and whatnot. It's all this scalable relationship problems. I love it. I could probably keep talking to you about all this stuff for another hour, but you brought me a dream. Kind of what we're here to do. I don't want to run you out of time. I know the clock's ticking, so I want to make sure we have plenty of time for you to not feel, well, for me not to feel like you got cheated out of the time you need for the dream. So I definitely want to jump into that. Do you feel ready to go? You got it.
Sure. I have one in my head.
Good deal. Let me I'm just gonna make a little note here as I do about the time. 27:37. So as per my usual process, I'm just gonna shut up and listen. Our friend's gonna tell us her dream, and we're gonna see what we can do with it together. So I'm ready when you are.
Okay, so I have had a dream. This is a dream that started when I think I was in middle school, and I would say that over my life it's changed. So it would be under the category of a recurring dream. So when I was little, the dream was often that I was on a pirate ship as a hostage, surrounded by water. There's no land in sight. And I would go through various permutations in this dream. I would either be trying to escape the ship and try to figure out how to get out of whatever I was in. I would, in another version, I would make friends with the pirates. And so that they would see me as one of the crew, and then I would be treated better. And then there was another version where I would just like try to fight my way off the ship. Mm-hmm. And so that happened, there's the visuals from that dream are actually still pretty clear in my head. It's very interesting. And I feel like this was going on for quite some time. I think it was more like kind of my middle school years that it was happening like that. And then I would say I didn't really keep track of dreams as into high school and as a young adult. Like nothing was really grabbing my attention, but over the last several years, what's happened is I'm still having dreams where I'm surrounded by water, but it's a totally different scenario. But it's always water with like nothing in sight, no land in sight. One of them, the visual that sticks out it was so weird. It was like everything was gray. The water was gray. It was kind of choppy. There are these huge, it was very industrial feeling, like these big, almost water wheels in the water that you would walk around, and like a whole city of people walking around these water wheels. And I was part of it. And I remember being confused going, I don't really know how I got here, but apparently this is what we're supposed to do, is walk around these water wheels. Because if you didn't, you ended up underwater. Like you had to stay above it. And it was really it felt almost apocalyptic in a way.
Yeah.
Everything was very gray.
So that would probably be a fantastic one to focus on like that. How recent was that?
That one happened, I think that was in 2020.
Okay. Did you have a different specific example of a discrete dream experience you wanted to focus on that was more recent, or do you want to go with that one?
We can focus on that one because I've always been kind of fascinated by it.
Fair enough. And I would say, as I have said many times, dreams, in my estimation, self-select for importance. You wake up remembering them, feeling a certain way about them. They stay with you for a while. There's something in there that you care about, that you probably want to understand. So it's a great one. So what I want to do is, as much as possible, I want to do kind of a chronological telling of the dream. First thing you can remember, what happens next until you wake up, or the end. So what do you got in that vein for that specific dream?
First thing that I remember about that particular dream was that I didn't know how I got there.
Okay.
So I just felt like I woke up in this reality that didn't match my usual reality. Like I felt kind of awake in it.
Okay.
Usually that's when I remember those dreams, is when I feel like I'm awake in the dream. And then the next thing that I remember about it was that I was confused about all the water. I didn't understand how people were existing with no land. And then I noticed that everybody who was like walking on these giant wheels looked like a bunch of zombies. They didn't it didn't look like zombies, just sort of that like trance state walking. Like it didn't seem like they were doing anything else but that. And I think that the next thing I noticed was that everything felt really depressing. Very gray, right? Gray water, gray sky. People didn't really seem to have a lot of color. And then I asked somebody what was going on, and I don't remember the answer. I just remember this overwhelming, like, the only thing for me to do was to fall in line with this, because like that was survival. Like that, the only thing to do was to just walk on. I couldn't change it, and I couldn't do anything to change any of the situation that I was in. I just had to start walking the way the rest of the people were walking. And then I think I did that for a while. And then nothing else happened after that. I think I did that for a while, and then I woke up.
Okay.
I didn't really have much interaction with the other people in the dream.
All right. Great description. And that's it. I mean, the telling of a dream can be very short. I've had some that went on for like 8-10 minutes because there was a lot of minute detail, but most couple 3 minutes, we get a bare bones structure we can kind of hang our discussion on. So that's phase one. Listen, shut up and listen. Probably good advice for most of us in most circumstances. Get a good idea of what's actually going on. And then go back through and try to understand. Phase two, deep dive. We just start asking questions, try and get me inside your head and looking out your eyes as much as possible, so I can kind of help make sense of what's being presented to us. And then somewhere between there and getting an answer, we kind of put that together collaboratively. So is there really a phase three? I mean, a phase three, I guess, would just be goal. We've hit the end. So in the very beginning, you had do you remember the feeling of, I don't know how I got here, being simultaneous with observing the scene, or you observed the scene and realized you didn't know how you arrived? How would you kind of characterize that?
I think it was simultaneously. I think I was there and then didn't understand how I got there.
Okay. This, I mean, right off the bat, that you said that is in terms of the first thing of like, I had this strong feeling, I didn't know how I got there. So why would that be present instead of absent? Why would it not be some other strong feeling or no strong feeling? So the idea of being, what I'm doing, I'm not offering answers or suggestions yet, but that immediately went ping. I'm like, there's something about needing to look at this, what you're about to experience, from that perspective of something you didn't create, you didn't choose to be there. You don't even understand how you arrived at this problem that's right in front of you, whatever it is, problem or experience. So I start flagging those things in terms of saying, let that percolate. Just consider the idea of that there's something important in the thought of arriving at an unknown situation, being some kind of an important context clue for the rest of it. So, anyway, I just like to mention that when I can, when I think of it. Sometimes I just have these ideas, I forget to mention them. If I could get a little bit more of an understanding of the scope and scale, say, of the visual, you are standing in the water at water level with other people.
Yeah, it was almost like they were like a water wheel or fan blades, like on top of the whatever structure it is. So standing on that structure, and there's a whole bunch of other people around on the same structure, and like in terms of like how far I could see, it's like if you were in the middle of the ocean and you turn 360 and all you see is water.
Okay, so this is not, say, a shallow water and you're standing in the water up to your ankles or something and wheels are turning. This is deep, expansive, ocean style water?
Yes.
Okay. What would you say the scale of the structures were? How far did they stick up out of the water? Were they hundreds of feet tall? Were they, 50 feet or 20 feet above the surface?
Yeah, I wouldn't say hundreds. It was probably between like 50 and 100 feet, like just big enough to feel big, but not enormous.
And what is your conception of now, when you said water wheel, I thought water wheel like outside an old timey sawmill, vertical turning like a hamster wheel.
Yeah, that's the part that it gets kind of fuzzy. Like, 'cause I kind of have the impression that it was like that. And then I'm actually looking at like a couple of notes that I made on this one. And it was, what I wrote down actually sounds a little bit more like if a water wheel was flipped on its side.
Okay.
You're going in a circle around it. But it's up, but there was still height to it. So it's like that whole structure is whatever, 50 to 100 feet tall. And you have to go around in a like horizontal circle on it.
Okay. So would you say it's like that vertical kind of fat disc, like cheese wheel shape turned on its side? Or is it actually also tall, almost like those vertical, air, what am I trying to say? Air wheels. Fuck, what are they called? Air turbines. But
more like a disc.
More like
a big disc.
And it was at the top of the structure, or it was down in contact with the water?
The structure is in contact with the water, and then the people were on top of the structure walking around it.
And when you say walking around it, are they operating the wheel themselves? Or
that's what I don't know.
Yeah. How did
it just seemed like this is what we do? And I was like, I don't get it.
Would you say that it didn't appear they were pushing anything like Conan style in the beginning, where he's operating that mill wheel by pushing it? They're just circulating around.
Yeah.
The blade type structure.
Yep.
Another idea. Lost it. Are they moving in the same direction with the is it
they were.
And from your wherever you're looking at it, was it turning clockwise or counterclockwise?
Clockwise.
And people circulating in the same direction.
Yeah, because one impression I have in the dream is that I tried to go the other way. Couldn't go the other way.
Okay, interesting. Try to go against the grain, so to speak.
Yeah.
You at least tried, and they're like, well, okay, well, that's not working. All right, so this is all we spent like 5 minutes on, just the initial first impression. What did you see? I'm trying to see it the way you see it. I'm not sure I even really have it, but definitely from what we know about you and talked about a little bit more, we've got these giant machines as would occur to the mind of an engineer. Perhaps there's a very, say, natural tendency to evoke that imagery as a metaphor or visual icon for something. So a wire, and we don't know what yet, but we'll get there hopefully. Why these machines and why the ocean? So that was your kind of, so you were also standing on top, and I'm all over the place. That's how I do this. How many others would you say there were around you? You're looking at a handful, or as far as the eye could see to the horizon. Were they arranged in a particular pattern, equal distant apart? Were they kind of randomly?
So it seemed like there were a handful of these structures. And then I would say like hundreds of people.
Kind of equally distributed, the people. A few here, a few there. Didn't seem like they were all piled up on one and just a scattering in other places. Okay. I don't know if that means anything, but
and the structure, and like I guess my impression is like the structures were spaced out, and so it's not like you could easily get from one to the other without falling in the water. Like you could look out from one and see kind of a little bit in the distance another one, but I don't recall.
And that, yeah, and there was no bridge work linking them. These are very separated and discrete instances of, there's and all kinds of associations come to mind. I mean, these are machines, they're structures, they're a place where some kind of work is being done, and it's not connected to other places. People can't move. They're kind of stuck with their machine, perhaps. All that kind of interesting stuff starts popping in my brain. I like to just mention it to say this might have something to do with something, but I'm getting a much better idea of it. So you said you had that kind of strong feeling of, I don't know how I got here. Not really understand. Did you have a sense that the machines made sense, or like, I don't even know what this is supposed to accomplish? Like, what's the purpose of all this?
I have no idea what okay. I don't know what this is supposed to accomplish. Didn't figure it out either.
Yeah. That's, yeah. I think that's very interesting. So you've got a lot of these, not a lot, I'd say there's at least two strong impressions of being presented with something that you don't understand. You don't know how you got there, what the reason is you would be there, what the purpose is for the machines. What the hell is going on here? This is like it's framing something as a complete mystery and saying, feel that you don't know what's going on, and then look at this. Very interesting there too. Yeah. When you became aware of yourself in that surrounding, was it almost also simultaneous that you kind of sensed, I'm aware this must be a dream, or did that kind of come a little bit after those initial impressions?
The awareness that I was in a dream, I would say, came after the initial impressions, because because it stuck with me for so long in such detail. It's like I didn't actually realize I was dreaming for a little bit.
Okay. Gotcha. So you were not only, you said you kind of also confused by all the water. Like, you're looking at this, like, this doesn't seem like a livable circumstance. You were saying, how can people live? There's no land anywhere as far as I can see. They're just way out in the ocean. Did that kind of occur to you chronologically? I guess we're saying you appeared. How did I get here? What is this? And then, like, these questions analytically started building on top of you. You're like trying to make sense of what's happening. So the next thing you thought is, what are people even doing here? How do they live in this environment?
I don't know if I was asking the question, how do you live in this environment? I think it was just more like, what are we doing and why?
Okay. You did initially kind of express it as how do people live without land? Do you remember having that kind of specific thought?
Yeah, but I feel like once I got more into the dream, it was like, well, what is this? What's the purpose of this? More
Okay.
less than how do you like as the dream progressed, it was less about, well, how do you live here? I was just trying to figure out why are we doing this
Yeah. And I don't
and
mean
what.
to nail you down on the idea of did you say a specific word and
Yeah.
impugn that with all, but the concept of how do people, this concept being, this doesn't look like a place that is hospitable for human flourishing in a certain way. And the concept you may have had in that is that, I mean, people need land and this is surrounded by nothing but water. Humans aren't water creatures. That's not our environment. So I just wanted to kind of maybe highlight that too and throw it in there. I think that impression was important. It's like, it's not a good environment for people. People can't
Mhm.
live under these conditions. This is not living. Um, yeah, that inspires all kinds of ideas of like, yeah, there's certain things that are overly mechanistic, being forced into relationship with objects and that are all separated and there's little groups and whatnot, but they're disconnected and it's not like, where's the land? Where's the houses? Where's the, good times on a Saturday? It seems like this is nothing but interaction with cold machines and zombie like behavior. Very, very interesting stuff.
Just drudgery is the
Yeah.
word that's coming to
And
my head.
and feel free to jump in anytime. Like if you're like, ooh, that made me think of something, bam. Because otherwise, I'm just going to keep rambling. That's what I do. I throw out associations until something goes. Oh, I feel that right here. I know what you mean. So I don't know if you have any thoughts so far on what I've said, or if not, that's fine.
No, I'm finding it really fascinating. I guess some of the thoughts that keep coming up for me is that water tends to be a theme for me in terms of learning how to flow versus fighting the current.
Mm-hmm.
Not I mean, that's just sort of like an ongoing theme in my life, anyways. Um, and yeah, I guess, and the other, like the confusion in the dream is it's a little bit of just feeling stuck in a situation. Like for me, I guess what keeps coming up is I was feeling stuck in a situation in that dream. And like, I just had to get on the wheel until I could figure out something, but I never figured out anything in the dream itself.
Yeah, gotcha. That's good. That's good things to just, and like I said, interrupt me anytime and throw it in there. So, you chronologically kind of, it's sometimes seven things happen literally at once and you try and describe them, the order you put them in. Maybe it didn't exactly happen that way, but, you had the awareness of your circumstances and the identification of objects and things. And then you kind of focused it a little bit more. And that's where you saw the people and kind of their relationship to the larger structures and objects and how they were interacting with it. And that's kind of when you noticed they're moving with the turning of the wheel, but that their behavior, and you mentioned it as like zombie like, but you kind of corrected it and said more like a trance. I mean, they weren't rotting flesh.
Not
Yeah,
rotten
they were which would be a different kind of imagery, but I get the zombie like demeanor to their so you've got all these people participating in something you don't understand from your perspective, and they appear to have no awareness of what they're doing either. It doesn't seem like they're happy or sad about it. It doesn't seem like they even know what they're doing. Is that kind of how it felt?
Yeah, that's how it felt. Like there was like no emotion. I didn't feel, other than my own confusion. I didn't notice or feel any other emotion from anybody else around me. It was literally just this is what we do feeling.
I think the word conformity just popped into my head. Like this,
Mhm.
and I think you've expressed it some other ways, or maybe I'm misremembering, but kind of a go along to get along, go with the flow in a way. I mean, there's that analogy with the water of a large body of water and wheels built to interact with the water and people interacting with the wheels, but not consciously. Like there's something in that representation of them is like they didn't look at you and say, "Hey, come on in, we'll get you up to speed." They didn't seem to have any awareness or expression that they understood what they were doing. Only that it's just they just did it. This is what we do.
Yeah.
I don't know if all of those ideas thrown at you inspired any thoughts or.
No, other than like, yeah, that's I think that's something that I've struggled with on this dream is the fact that nobody was really interacting necessarily with each other and they weren't really interacting with me. And like where what does that mean? Like completely asleep almost.
Yeah. With each other or me. or you. What else did we have here? So at some point you did. Oh, no. The next thing you mentioned was, and I think this may be important in terms of the flow. I'm pretty sure this feeling might have come to you in that point of you've made all these assessments and it left you with, you said, a kind of a feeling of this is depressing. And it does, I don't want to put that idea in your head, but it does seem like that occurred at a particular moment in the dream. Like that, you didn't start with that feeling until you assessed what you see.
Yeah, I would say I definitely didn't start with that feeling, but it did come in. It did come in as the dream progressed, as this is really depressing and almost like a how do I get out of it?
Yeah, and I think it makes sense in terms of, say, a logical progression of ideas is how would you arrive at the emotional response to a situation without having first observed the situation? You got to look around going, "Oh, this isn't good. I don't want to be here. This is," and the idea of the many people dream without color. That's not necessarily significant, but the idea that observation of the grayness of everything, it's this very lacks, dynamic, lacks emotionality. We think of, gray skies, sadness, the color gray being, it's very indistinct, doesn't mean anything. It just doesn't stand out. Even black and white are sharp contrasts, but gray is just, bleh, there's nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so you're looking at this situation saying, I don't want to be here. This is depressing. I don't feel good in this environment. I would rather not be here. And you get this kind of like, well, I wish I could leave. I wrote down escape because you did mention that of like in your past pirate adventures, there was escape was a focus, getting out of a bad situation. So I brought that word back to try and, if escape doesn't feel like the right word, you can always say, no, there's a different shade of meaning to it.
There might be, like in this one, there might be a different shade of meaning than escaping. It might be even more like, how do I change the situation?
Okay. Yeah, that is very.
Yeah, it definitely was a different feeling because the pirate ship ones, like those were so long ago.
Yeah.
And I can still remember how I felt when I was like trying to get off the ship, right? And that wasn't the feeling here.
I'm glad I asked, and I'm happy to be wrong if it gets a better answer. Please never hesitate to correct me. Pat me on the head. You tried. Let me tell you what it really is. I'm okay with that.
Pretty dead on with the rest of it.
And that is a great thing too, is in terms of nailing down those feelings. So escape has a element of danger, maybe. You have to escape from something life-threatening. You have to escape from an imprisonment. It could have been a shade of that, but this is more of like you wanted to have a positive impact. You're like, this is not good. What can I do? That is a very different mental approach to observing a problem. Is like, can I have a positive impact here? I feel strongly I should. Like that's something, that desire it felt right to have a positive impact. Very cool. where are we going there? Yeah, and you noticed, and you did, and I kind of skipped this too, but the waves were, it was a rough sea. They were very active waves. It wasn't a calm, placid.
No, it wasn't calm and placid. It was definitely active, like choppy, but not huge
Yeah.
waves. So like choppy is the best way to describe it.
Gotcha. Did you get the feeling that the wheels were making the waves choppy, or the other way around, that the choppy waves were moving the wheels?
I don't know that I got either way on that.
I was wondering, I completely forgot to ask how the machines functioned. If you had any idea of that in terms of, are they turning the water, or is the water turning them? Are they energy collection type?
Yeah,
responsive to the water wheel, or
I think it was more like an energy collection type. So
okay.
like the waves, like the water was choppy, and then if I looked down, I could see where the wheel was making it, even bigger waves.
Gotcha.
Basically, like cutting through the water, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, because that would be an entirely different kind of symbolism, so to speak, that, wait a minute, these are not natural ocean waves. Somehow the machines are making the waves. But it wasn't. It was a little more energy collection, working, the wheels turning because interaction with natural forces. That is, it's something separate. Good to distinguish those two. What else were we looking at here? And then after you had this is depressing. What can I do to help? What impact could I have towards change? That seems to be when you first reached out to someone and said, hey, what's going on?
Yeah, I actually think I asked that question before. Like it was when I had fallen into step, because that was the only thing to do, was to fall into step with everybody.
Okay.
And so as I'm walking around it, I'm starting to think, well, how do we change this? And can I get out of this situation? And can we, like, what do we do to make it better?
Okay.
But I don't have the impression, I think I have the impression that was a lot of thought.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm on the hamster wheel now.
Right? Yeah.
I'm still gonna try to figure out how to
So
get out of
actually
here.
maybe a reversed set of circumstances. And this is fine. When we tell the dream, sometimes we put some things out of order. That's why we got to do the deep dive, because get that order correct. Because the order sometimes makes a difference. In this case, it seems like what happened was you had your observation, assessment, and then you felt this compulsion to fall in line as kind of a necessary behavior for survival. Like, in order to exist in this environment, you're going to have to do what other people are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
Okay. Then you had the feeling, well, this is depressing. I don't like this. This is not the way I want whatever this is to work. You feel an urge
I think
to,
I had depressing before I fell into step, but I think I had depressing, but but this is something that I have to do.
okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so you did have the feeling, well, this is all depressing, but I guess this is what I have to do, fall into step for, to get along, survive in this environment. Then you had that feeling of wanting to change things.
Mm-hmm.
Then you reached out to someone and said, hey, what's going on? What is this? Does that seem like the right order of events?
No, because I had the impression that I saw the situation, I assessed it, definitely felt like depressed as soon as I could see everything.
Yeah.
And then I asked somebody what's going on.
And I wanted to focus on that a little bit in terms of how you asked, relative position. Was it a man or a woman? Were you walking with them around the outside trying to get their attention?
Yeah, I like the impression is that it was a man, and it was just somebody who was coming toward me, and I asked a question, And then the answer was something, the answer was essentially, this is just what we do. So then I was like, okay, for survival, I mean, I got to get on this thing. And I'm still confused. I don't understand why we're doing this, but I'm going to.
Gotcha. Okay. That's good for me to kind of get that straight in my head. A little bit of the order of operations. And so you participated for a while. Oh, now before we leave that, any features of the man? Anything that came to
Just
mind?
somebody who was tall and kind of like tall and lanky. Like I didn't really get an impression that it was really somebody that I knew.
That would stand out, you'd hope. Or dressed in any particular way? Just, nondescript pants, shirt, whatever. No particular uniform. Were, as far as you know, people all dressed differently. Regular style.
Yeah.
Nothing stood out.
Yeah, nothing stood out. Pretty much dressed differently.
Okay. So each, as if they were just say, I get a mental flash of the diversity of types and costumes, dress and styles that you might see in a video image of a crowded New York street. Everyone's walking down. They all got their own thing going on. Nothing special. Definitely not uniforms. So that wasn't quite this. I mean, that's a different level of, suggesting of, let's say, dystopian sci-fi future stuff where everyone's in the gray uniform and whatnot. No, this was actually just kind of like everyday people just doing their thing.
That's what,
Yeah. And so when you decided to walk with them, was it pretty much, the guy said, this is just what we do. And he kept walking and you're like, well, I guess I'll just, and so you kind of followed him in a way, not behind him, like in lockstep, but okay, I guess I'm going to start walking too.
Yeah.
And did anything else happen to you while going around there? Did you try to get anyone else's attention? Did you observe any change in the way the machine worked, the ocean?
There's like another person who I think was a woman that I tried to get her attention, probably like as I came up beside her or something like that. And I kind of got the same answer. So it's like same question, same answer.
Okay.
And then, I woke up before it concluded. Like that's basically the end of the dream.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Like I never got to try to figure out how do we change this. I just thinking, how do we change this?
Fair enough. And you just kind of let that idea sit with you as you went ahead and like, well, for now I'm going to do this until maybe something occurs to me. But your focus remained on that, perhaps till the end. And then I never know. Well, we may never know, in broad terms. Was that the end of the dream? Because that was the end of the dream. That was the completion of the package of thoughts, conceptualizing a specific idea, or did it get interrupted? You had to go to the bathroom and it woke you up. The cat jumped on your back or whatever, and you rolled over. Did you have it right before you were going to wake up in the morning anyway? And it's just, the dream just kind of ended because wake up time. Sometimes dreams are interrupted. It's like, well, this is a fragment of something that probably would have gone on to something else, or it's not. It's very hard to tell that sometimes. Okay, so go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say this did feel kind of like a fragment because I mean, usually, I often wake up before dreams conclude.
Okay.
Because I think I mostly dream like, or at least the ones that I remember are right before I wake up.
Very cool. Gotcha. And that's a very
fragment.
That's a very common phenomenon too. There are, speaking of my historical dream literature that I will never stop hawking, I find it fascinating, and I hope people do too, because these guys are talking about that as like there are theories that we can only remember dreams that happen closer to awakening. The other ones are just too deep. We're just not consciously aware enough to it's almost like as much as dreams put us in connection with our subconscious, some dreams are lost to the subconscious. They all happen there and they never get out. They never get into conscious awareness at all. So believing some people, and what I personally believe, is that we dream the whole night because our brain never really stops firing and doing things. So, and most of that is gone forever. We think a million thoughts a minute all night long. And then some of them make it out and we can look at. So that does a little bit put a kink in my theory of dreams self-selecting for importance. Maybe there are other important dreams we just can't remember, but at least the ones that happen that we are aware of, when they stay with us, that feels important. So I'm sticking to my theory. Okay. We went through all of that. We did the deep dive again. This is usually where I pause again and say to people, given all of that and all the little things I threw out there and some of the carrots I mentioned to you to kind of say, look here, look there, is anything coming together for you about what it might be expressing, kind of the big picture? It does or it doesn't. Some people have like, yeah, I know exactly what this means now. And I'm like, tell me, you tell. And some people don't.
So for me, what's coming up is that, I spent my entire life in conformity. And at the time that this dream happened, I was actively shedding all of that. I mean, we were in the pandemic. I think this was fall of 2020.
Yeah.
And I was actively looking to change my job. I was still working part-time, but I was actively looking to change it. I was trying to figure out what was next. I was really scared to bring in, to present myself to like an engineering or an analytical audience as somebody who uses intuition and wants to teach other people or guide people and like tuning into their own intuition.
They're going to think I'm nuts.
Yeah, they're going to think I'm totally crazy and wackadoodle.
Yeah.
So like, with everything that kind of you said as we went along, it's like that it feels like it was this push pull between continuing to conform and then trying to get out of that. That's just kind of what's coming up for me, because of a lot, like it was, this is where I just crack myself up. Like it felt bad enough to want to be talking about, Brené Brown's work or any other person who's talking about vulnerability and emotions and communication. But then I'm layering on top of that, something that you literally can't really grasp, that's very intangible, that's intuition. I actually believe in connection to universal energies, and like that was starting to really come online. And so it was like I had a few experiences during the pandemic where that were psychic experiences. Our neighbor passed away in December of 2019, and she had lived in that house since it had been built. So she had been here like 60 years or something like that. And her house started to get remodeled while we were in the pandemic. And there was one day where I was meditating in my bedroom. I was doing this virtual stretch session with a friend of mine who had a stretch business. And at the end, I'm sitting there and I have my eyes closed, and he's like, okay, if you're settled down, you just want to meditate, I'll just take off. And then all of a sudden I had felt this presence in my room, and I was like, somebody's here. And this guy who's my friend just thinks that's the coolest thing ever. He got all excited. Who's here? Right. And it was like, it felt like my neighbor was there, and she was like, what? And she's asking me, what's happening to my house? And I was like,
wow. That is an experience.
That had happened like in the spring of 2020. And then we're getting to the fall of 2020. And like I had a couple more experiences like that. And I'm just feeling like I'm a crazy person.
Yeah. Especially for someone with a very, say, rational, logical, mechanical mindset of like the rational order of the world, that things make sense. And then have experiences that are completely out of left field. It's like, the hell was that? What? And, and even it's even say more impactful sometimes when it's not your natural inclination to believe such things. just all of a sudden you're confronted with, and it's like me too. I'm a very rational, skeptical side of things. I leave all the spooky woo wide open. I don't know what it is. Maybe so. If you tell me you felt the presence of your neighbor, I believe you. I don't have any reason to think you're just lying about it. So what the hell is that? What are these things? I think they do happen. I just can't explain them very well, but you seem to be in a very receptive mindset at that time to change as well. You were looking at change. You wanted change. You were enacting change. So, I mean, okay. Had you said, no, nothing's coming to me, my next question would have been, what was going on in your life at the time? You put that together all yourself. That's where we were going. Is how does this relate to the ideas I'm processing at the time? And then what does it say to me about how I feel about those processes, life circumstances I'm enduring, or the prospect of change and what I want that to look like. So we've got, in your dream here, we've got these very engineering iconic structures. We've got water turbines, and well, I didn't even put this together too. You were a damn engineer. Water turbines, of course. But this was undammed water. I probably should have put that together too. This is oceanic, wide open, untamable water in a way that a river held back by a dam cannot be. It's something very iconic in there about the human beings being moved by the forces of nature in a way that we really can't control, and in some ways have to fall in line with. I mean, there is definitely that element.
That's fascinating. Yeah. I didn't. Yeah. I like that element. I mean, if I think about my own experience, it was, I was very resistant to my spiritual awakening and to believing any of this stuff. I mean, the guy that I talk about, that I was doing like this virtual session and he's leading me through stretches and all this stuff. Well, I had been working with him for several years. I think it was over a year into working with him, he revealed that he's actually like a trained shaman, trained medicine man. And, he was doing body work and trying to figure out like the next thing. He does energy work and all this stuff. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Why? I wonder why I'm attracted to this guy. Like, why am I working with him? And he actually helped me with a lot of the energetic stuff that started coming up for me. And it is, it's fascinating just to be felt like it. And that was the other thing too. Like I said, water has constantly been a theme. When I started a coaching program, like getting my own coaching and a group coaching program, which was all around intuition and energy. And it was super woo woo. And I was like, I can't believe I'm signing up for this, but I feel like I need to do it. Like I was on a facilitation call, I was being facilitated by the coach. And I said, I just feel like I'm on a giant water slide. I don't even know what to do. And her response was, well, there's nothing to do. Just, what kind of swimsuit do you want to be wearing?
Throw your hands up and say, wee, and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, this theme of like the forces of nature, and they're just going to move you forward and you might not feel ready, especially someone coming from the background that I was in, super analytical. And I still even, it's settled down to a point now where I'm like, okay, believing in this stuff is no different than going to church and believing in God. No different. And I was raised in a church and so I was taught a very right, wrong, dogmatic viewpoint on things like religion and spirituality. But I finally have come around to it's no different, really.
There's a wide open range of similar understandings that can be achieved from different paths, and it's a lot of overlap too. It's if you speak to say someone who's very devout Catholic, they'll say meditation is not the same as prayer. Technically true, but I think there is tremendous overlap between the two. Of it's definitely emptying your mind in a way, and sometimes you meditate on a problem, and that's a metaphor we use to say, well, you're not literally sitting there doing nothing, Om style. I mean, that's meditation. It was people think of it, but the background process of letting what I call an idea percolate. Like I don't have an answer, but I want one. That's a kind of passive meditation we do where we get we do try to stop our conscious focus on driving towards an answer and let it come to us in the emptiness of that seeking, that active seeking. That's why I tell people to sleep on it. Old school advice, like, oh, of course, yeah, give it some time. I used to think it meant don't make a decision right now, but why? You will have, I can't tell you how many times I've done that myself, where I go to bed and I wake up the next day with an answer to something I couldn't figure out yesterday. I don't remember a dream happened, but whatever that background process, that meditative lack of active attention, the emptying of the mind to let the answer come to you. Anyway, that's my ramble. I'm like, there's more to spirituality than some hard divisions that people conceive.
Right.
That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. And then, and then the other thing too, that you bring up a really great point. Like sometimes, you can look at it. I actually have started speaking out more about intuition, and honestly, engineers are probably some of the most intuitive people around. Where it's kind of conditioned out of us,
and
because
they would say they're not. They're like, no, I'm very rational. I don't go with gut, nothing. Show me the data.
Yeah, I'm not going to go with gut, but I've been in meetings where it's what we're determining is all by engineering judgment. And it's like, well, what is that engineering judgment based on? Well, part of it is gut. And then an engineer that I know personally said, well, intuition for me feels like I've been working on it. Somewhere in the back of my mind is like these processes. They are just as you described, just like keep going, or you're always taking in information from your environment, and then you might get this idea, and it's intuition, or like it just feels right, and that's it. And so I think there's so many ways to approach the idea of what intuition is and what an intuitive hit is, just and the same, it's very broad. There is no one right way.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it seems like this is a lot of what you were processing at the time. So to bring it back around to your dream and hopefully give you a more full answer, a view of the picture, 30,000 foot, looking down on it, you've got your, iconic engineering structural type of thing. And this is the time in your life when you're looking at, this is not fulfilling to me. This seems like if I continue to just literally go in circles with other people who are just not really giving their own lives and behaviors the kind of thought that I'm trying to, that's depressing. This, in a way, it seems to me, and you can tell me if this sounds right, but this dream is like just saying, let me take a second look at what I'm in the middle of here and make sure how I feel about it. Let's look at where I came from and all the things that are represented by it. How does that make me feel to imagine I'm still going to do that? And you're like, this is not what I want. This is depressing. I want change. And in some ways, it seems like you're also giving yourself a representation of, you're not going to get the answer from someone else. The people who are locked in their loop, and this is just what they do, and they're fine with it. They're not even thinking, is this what I really want? They're like, this is just what we do. Like, you ask them and they just give you the pat answer, and you ask multiple people and you're not going to get the answer from it. It's interesting you put both men and women in there, so you're not limiting it to only valuing one perspective. Say you're going to try and get a proper sample size, so to speak, and to make a good assessment. And probably you may have gone on to have other thoughts had it not been interrupted fragment style, but that may have also been a sufficient end of the thought process of like, I've looked at this and I've placed myself imaginarily in the situation unchanged, and it's unfulfilling. This is not what I want. This is not where I'm going to be happy. And you kind of just let that thought linger of like, not where I want to be. And that may have been sufficient. Like we do that in the, we do it in the daytime with our daydreams or imaginings. I mean, we imagine the solution to a problem and the consequences that would obtain from that specific type of solution. And then based on what those positive or negative consequences are, we say that's a good solution or it's not. So I think that might have been what was happening with you with this dream, is just that active second thinking twice in a way.
Mhm.
I don't know your thoughts.
I think that's I mean, that feels like a really accurate description of everything that I was going through at the time that I had the dream, and I haven't had a dream like that for a while. I haven't. I've had other dreams that, and actually, I went through a period of time recently. I just wasn't remembering any of them.
That's me every day, my whole life. That's one of the reasons I do this. Don't hardly remember anything.
And I would like wake up and I'd have some sort of impression and kind of go, oh, I must have worked it out if I don't remember it. Like, I feel like the ones that I remember are the ones where I'm working something out.
Yeah. I think very much too. That's also, and I've spoken with some other guests and just random people in general arguing on Twitter and whatnot. But the idea that possibly people who spend a lot of conscious, aware mental energy problem solving and think really deeply and broadly and exhaustively on all kinds of, on say one specific problem, they're probably going to think all the thoughts they could possibly think about it while they're awake. And then while they're asleep, it's like, let's think about something else, whatever that problem was. So if the more exhaustively you review everything, the less need maybe. And I think my brain's just spinning so much during the daytime that there's nothing left to dream about. Like, I've got to all the thoughts. Yeah. But it is interesting too, though, when I go to bed without an answer to a problem and I sleep on it for the specific purpose. It's a good thing we're almost done. I can't blah, blah, blah anymore. But I don't remember a dream occurring, although I'm certain it must have. I think they're just so deep maybe that I'm not really having any of them that are near conscious awareness enough for me to bring it out and be able to tell anyone what I saw or experienced. So that's me. I'll talk about me for hours. Sorry. Just my thoughts. Well, if you feel like we got to a pretty decent feeling understanding, if it makes sense to you, then we got an answer.
Yeah.
Okay. Good
That's
deal.
great. I mean, actually, you brought up quite a few things that I hadn't thought of. I think I've been spending the last couple of years just kind of every now and then that dream shows up in my head again, and I'm like, I can't quite get to what it meant. So this was a great session.
Right on. Yeah. And definitely if we hit on something, you're going to feel it. And it seems like you did, but it should maybe change the nature of how you interact with those thoughts. What else was I going to say in terms of the process you're experiencing? Not understanding it makes it mysterious, makes you question and wonder, so you hang on to it, but also that dream being an encapsulated type of question you were asking yourself. Anytime that an awareness of that specific dream comes back, you're probably leaning into those similar types of questions. So it may never go away in terms of you thinking about it. It may always be with you in terms of, well, I remember thinking about this before. That's how I conceived of it. And so that'll be inspired by the same thoughts.
Oh yeah. That's fascinating. That's good to know as it pops up in my awareness every now and then.
Yeah. If you get a strong impression of, oh, this is like that dream. Yeah. Yeah. Like, what am I thinking right now that brought that back? Why is that relevant to my experience? And from this analysis together, you can start looking at what element of the dream spoke to the issue. Cause it may be, there may be 17 discrete elements. We talked about a bunch of different things that kind of went all together. So it may not be the whole thing all at once for every thought that brings it back. It might be, this is like the hamster wheel part. This is like the ocean part. This is like the people without an answer part. So if you can maybe pull those out, it might help you get a better idea of what you're currently thinking. And the more conscious we can make these thoughts, formulating them in a way that we understand what they are, the more we're able to get a better answer out of it eventually. So yeah. It's me rambling again. Well, I know you're on a time limit and we've done the thing and it's been great talking to you. So we'll kind of wrap it up and we'll let you go.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm going to do the double housekeeping. We've got Tara McFarland from Denver, Colorado. She is an intuitive life coach and spent 24 years as a civil engineer in a previous life. You can find her at createconversationllc.com. Link's going to be in the description below. Also, would you kindly please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Always need more volunteer dreamers. Also, 14 books of historical dream literature for sale at benjaminthedreamwizard.com via Amazon. Got t-shirts. Like to wear these once in a while and remind people they're out there. Coffee mug, direct donations, buy me whiskey for gaming, and that'll do it. Thanks again, Tara.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, and everybody out there, thanks for listening. Try to say the thing.